story at our website this morning. If you go to newsradio1310.com, it says bill would end long-standing ban on bikes in U.S. wilderness. When I was at Craters of the Moon the other day, they had some areas shut down because people are walking on the lava flows and breaking them up into dust. Now, eventually, nature will do that, but I guess they don't want human beings enhancing that or hastening the process. But think about the wilderness. We can't have bicycles. You can't go walking there. On the other hand, John Pitts, runs the county fair here in Twin Falls. I guess run might not be the proper word, but you get the idea. Had a Facebook post this morning about visiting Yellowstone for a couple of days. Probably the last time off he's going to have until the fair is over. But he mentions that he only saw like 12 large animals in Yellowstone Park over a period of 2 days while he was there. And he says he used to see hundreds. And he believes it's wolves. Not only are they culling herds, they are now reducing herds. And yet there are so many places off limits to human beings in these parks. But on the other hand, you can introduce wolves, and wolves can gobble up everything else in sight, and that's okay, even though those wolves are not even that same type of wolves that lived throughout this region 100-some years ago. 9:35, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Government, what was it Ronald Reagan who said it? Government is not the solution, government is the problem. There you go. There's a fine example of that in all of those stories about wilderness areas. And I also have this today. New FBI documents show IRS Tea Party applications were sent to the black hole. The IRS took an additional step when it was getting Tea Party applications. These were for, not for profit status, mainly a few years ago, as they were all filing their group paperwork. Some of them actually did decide to. They had different statuses. I know some folks who were running one of these organizations and decided that they would deal with the IRS and pay taxes and the like. But all applications linked with the Tea Party were sent to something called Group 7822. And here's a quote. This is from the Daily Caller today. Group 7822 was composed of 12 to 15 people and was simply a place for the Tea Party cases to be held in inventory while the agent waited to receive guidance from the Washington office. There had been no precedence previously on these issues. If the case said it supports politics and political activity, it would be put into Group 7822, unquote. Now, this was not happening for liberal organizations. They were calling themselves, I think, the Coffee Party at the time. You don't hear much about them because it wasn't. Even in San Francisco, I think they got 15 people out for their first few meetings, and it folded quickly thereafter. There's another unnamed manager at the IRS had this to say. That organization or that office was called DC, said DC is like a black hole. In other words, they knew if they sent these applications on, they could delay them and hold them up forever if need be. And that was the goal of your government in dealing with people who had opinions different than the Emperor Barack Hussein Obama. And that's how they were cutting off dissent, was simply by doing these things, the foot dragging that goes on among bureaucrats. Speaking of bureaucrats, same publication, the Daily Caller, has this. Millions in embezzlement spent on pimped-out trucks and high-end knives could be bankrupting this government energy grid. These are government workers, and they were going out. They were with the Western Area Power Administration. They were taking their government credit cards out and buying stuff for themselves to the tune of at least $7 million. And that's one agency. Think about how much of this is going on, really, at all other government agencies. They were buying gun cases and scopes. These guys had no business buying any of that stuff. That's according to a source. Internal audits obtained by the Daily Caller found the Western Area Power Authority. Workers spent $6.8 million on government credit cards without, quote, documented evidence that the priority of sources requirements was met or considered, unquote. That's only the beginning, though, of the problems. Sources familiar with the issues plaguing the government-run utilities and its managers may have even played a major role in allowing fraudulent purchases to go undetected. Quote, their managers even knew they were shopping. They just told them not to get caught. Unquote. That was another source. So there you go. These people are having a great time on your tax dollar. Plus, you're going to also subsidize them in retirement. with their pensions and their health benefits for years and years and years to come. How about this? We have this today. Medicare's next 50 years, fix the problems and improve the program. This is coming from the Daily Signal. Medicare covers 57.1 million people, but 10,000 baby boomers are turning age 65 every day. By 2030, the government actuaries expect over 81 million Americans will be enrolled. Regardless of the outcome of the election or what political candidates say or don't say, Medicare's growing challenges are going to get tougher. Now, if you have a country that is already $20 trillion officially in debt, then what? How are you going to pay for all this? How are you going to actually also buy tanks and planes and ships to defend ourselves if all of a sudden you no longer have any money left in the public treasury and someone calls your note and you've got people, old folks, who need medical care and you've made this promise to them for the last 50 years? What are you going to do about it? And Hillary Clinton is proposing $1 trillion in new taxes to cover all the new free stuff she says she's going to provide. Again, the question is, how? Coming up on 940, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Some closing thoughts on the way. Speaking of all of those promises that Hillary Clinton is making, and the country is, when he died a couple of years ago, let me just jump off here for a moment. Louis Zamperini, who was the famed Olympian, and there was a movie made about him called Unbroken, about his experience in World War II after the Olympics. He'd been a big American hero, and then he was a hero in World War II, shot down, and then spent a couple of months at sea, nearly starved to death, captured by the Japanese, and then survived torture and humiliation in a Japanese prison camp. He died a couple of years ago at the age of 96, and he was asked about the future of the country, and he said, because of all this debt, I have no more hope for my beloved United States. And then he died shortly thereafter. I mean, almost famous last words, but of a truly great American. And he said simply, we're going to become vassals of the Chinese Empire because of the way we've run our own government. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I do want to remind you today quickly about my friend Dr. Eric F. Jones. He uses a holistic, systemic approach to wellness, and he's been in practice now since 1993. And he has master's and doctoral degrees in marriage and family therapy. Dr. Eric F. Jones uses methods of alternative healing, naturopathy, medicinal herbs, nutrition, sound waves, intellectual cognitive self-regulation, and naturopathy to help remedy and manage mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual challenges. Currently accepting new patients, and he has evening and Saturday appointments available. His telephone number 208-731-7178. And you can find him on Facebook. That's Eric F. Jones, PhD, mental health and wellness therapist. Caller joining us this morning. It's 9:45 and 68. You're up next on KLIX.
Now, I appreciate, I applaud the thought that you say to learn something. Hey, why don't you check the economies of Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, compared to the ones up here in Idaho, and you tell me if those tax cuts are working. Because over there is cash flow. There is cash flow. Right here is nothing but negative cash flow. It goes up to the government, and
what's
you
the
never
unemployment
see
rate?
again.
What's the unemployment rate in Idaho? Hello? Anybody home? What's the unemployment rate? Hello? What's the unemployment rate in Idaho compared to California or Oregon? Or I guess it's California. Just throwing that out there. You know that California and Oregon have schools. I was reading this yesterday at Wallet Hub. In fact, there's a post at newsradio1310.com about this, that the schools in those states are abysmal. Among the worst schools, if you wanted to send your kids to a school and get them all educated so they could someday graduate, you wouldn't send them. Oregon is number 42. There's 51 surveyed. That's the District of Columbia thrown in there, too. It's pretty bad as well. And in California is at the bottom of the heap. And again, what are they doing there that's special or better than Idaho? And again, what's the unemployment rate in Idaho? Hello? Anybody home? Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. So this guy apparently thinks that $20 trillion officially in debt is a good thing? Is that what you're telling me? I guess back south of the border, things run so well there with all of the debt they've got, too, that we'd like to have the same thing here. Then what? We'll all have to cross the border and sneak into Canada? Is that it? That's the next step? What happens when you run out of countries after you've bankrupted everybody else? 736 0300. 736 0300. The man who should be the next president of the United States is writing at his website, Alan B. West. Truth to liberal progressives is like sunlight to a vampire. And he says, of course, right now everyone is talking about the end of the DNC convention and whether or not there's a bump for Hillary Clinton. What amazes me, he writes, for the days that I did watch the convention is how the mainstream media analyzed the event. I believe you have to understand your opposition and get inside their decision-making cycle, such as, Hillary was wearing white tonight. White is pure. Oh, little girls will be told by their mothers for generations to come that this was the night a woman accepted a major party endorsement for president. And next year when Hillary's president, all of you perverts out there who'd like to marry horses, cows, and pigs are going to be allowed to do it. And that's what truly makes America great. Yep, that's what makes America great. Well, Colonel West goes on to write, what's most telling is how little policy analysis was presented by the leftist media. And he writes, can someone explain to me why anyone sees Barack Obama as an economic success as a president? We have the lowest workforce participation rate since the late 1970s. So statistically, we cannot have a 5% unemployment rate. But you can if you change the calculation and not count the almost 95 million Americans out of work. He goes on to say, in the reign of Obama, we've gone from an already troubling $10 trillion deficit to $19.3 trillion in debt. Our economic condition is in such bad shape that the Federal Reserve, namely Janet Yellen, is doing everything it can to manipulate artificial means to mask the failures. You can't print enough money to rectify this deplorable situation. Here's the latest news about the GDP performance under Obama, as reported by Zero Hedge. With Wall Street expecting the U.S. economy to grow 2.6% in the second quarter, there were many shocked faces moments ago when the Census Bureau reported that not only did the U.S. economy grow by a paltry 1.2% in the quarter, but quarter one GDP was slashed from an already poor 1.1 to below 1%. Yeah, that's what them Democrats who are giving all of you folks, especially those folks who've decided to cross the border in the dark of night to come here for a free lunch, that's what it actually costs. That's the wages of sin, if you will, is the collapse of the United States, the almighty, once almighty United States. This is why the Democrats want you to vote for them, though. Daily Signal today, judge considers temporary ban to halt implementation of North Carolina bathroom law, because they want grubby 35-year-old men who haven't shaved to sit next to your 3-year-old in the potty. That's more important. How about this? Netflix has added such movies to its rundown as Funny or Die presents Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal and Inconvenient Truth, just in time for Election Day to try to sway you. Here's another one. 5 states are going to try to legalize marijuana on the November ballot. See, that's more important than controlling your debt problems. Here's another one. Black Lives Matter's real agenda. Roland C. Warren, a black man writing at the Washington Times, explains that Black Lives Matter says right on its Facebook page, not reported by mainstream media, that its goal is to destruct the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. They've already done that in the black community. But, hey, that's the goal, right? Whatever success they feel that they're going to get out of this, I don't know. But it shows you that perhaps Donald Trump is right when he says the devil is actually behind this. And American people just keep sitting here saying, I wonder what I'm going to get in my goodie bag. When Santa comes to the house, gee willikers, what's for me? Don't think about the country, think about yourself. Harry Dent, by the way, the economist who's predicted much of our troubles over the last 20, 30 years, Harry Dent says China's about ready to collapse because of its building bubble, its real estate bubble, and now that they have the world's largest economy, or, competing with us for that title, we vie back and forth, that they're going to splash a great deal many boats. And the Chinese government has been trying to prop up the stock market there by buying the stocks, just like the U.S. government did in 1929, which was followed by what? Dent says we are in for a calamity on the economic level like nothing we have seen before in our current lifetimes. Robert Prechter, who's an economist, had been predicting during the last crash in 2008 that we were headed toward the worst crash in 300 years since the South Sea bubble burst. That's only been postponed because the government has printed a lot of money and pushed it into the system. That's like saying you're prolonging your cold by taking cold medicine. It doesn't make it go away. It eases some symptoms for a while, but it stretches out that symptom. And we've just been putting off the inevitable for so long, and yet, by gosh, Hillary says I'm going to get to go to college for free. You're next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, you just spoke about Black Lives Matter, and during the whenever I get a chance, I'm in the house. I might kick over to the NFL Network, and Michael Bennett, defensive lineman for the Seattle Seahawks, a very prominent individual. He's talking about Black Lives Matter and social justice. And I said to myself, here the NFL, it just infuriates me. And so if you watch NFL Network once in a while, we know everything about everything. Odell Beckham Jr. limped off the field from practice field because he might be hurt. I mean, we know every tiny little detail about everything, but we know nothing about our government and how it works and the corruption. And we as a people are responsible for where we are. And we couldn't give a you-know-what about what matters in our country. And you just are so sick of it. You wake up in the morning hoping, again, I'm repeating myself, that somehow a little sliver of hope will show up and you will feel like we're going to maybe win. And I don't know, man. I'm kind of babbled there a little bit, but I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. And of course, ever since the Inside Training Camp started, I haven't found anything worth watching on. You want to talk about turning football into something boring. And really, people, if you're playing for the Seahawks, you should be less so worried about discrimination about your skin color and more about the fact they make you wear a buzzard on your helmet. You're next, and you're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. Go ahead.
I got a good nephew that'll meet your daughters. Maybe you'll...
Hey, tell you what, take a hike, pal. You called once, that's enough. If you want your own show, get it. But you don't have the talent to get one. But if you might work at it and learn English, you probably need about 40 years to do that. You might be able to pull it off. Yeah, thank you. Take a hike. You ever mention my daughter again, by the way, I don't care that I'm a public figure and this is radio or not. You're going to be cruising for a bruising. You bring my family into this, then it is personal. Got it? 9:55. Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 71. Got a couple of minutes before we wrap up the program today. As a regular American, I have a little pride in my family, and I have a little pride in the fact of my own self-reliance. I realize that is difficult for a great many people out there who've decided that they're going to come and feed at the public trough. That's got to come to an end. We can't afford to do it any longer. This is an obscenity that is being perpetrated on the actual hardworking people in this country. Speaking of money and money being spent and debt and everything else, there's a great piece from a college president today in the Wall Street Journal about how the government, if a family actually saves money for their child's college education, they are then penalized. On the surface level, that sounds like a great idea. Well, you're not going to get any aid because you already have a pile of money there, and you can send your child off to college. Well, okay, now you've just convinced people not to save for college because you can turn around and take somebody else's money to send your child to college. Get it? Or borrow money and then go off and get a job afterwards when you get the BA in basket weaving, I suppose. It's 9:56 now as we close on the morning program. Just a reminder, Rush Limbaugh will follow us at 10 o'clock. News from Fox, of course, first, and then this afternoon it's Sean Hannity. Hannity will follow the news from Fox at 1 o'clock. Glenn Beck following Fox News at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and Dave Ramsey tonight. And I had a couple of other things I was going to close on, too, as well. But getting back to all those stories about the economy and the direction it's going, there's no growth, folks. We've had 8 years of excuses from Emperor Barack Hussein Obama And now his protege, she'd like to take over and do more of this, more damage. You got to be nuts. And this notion that free, and we just have to, raise taxes and print more money and borrow more money. It's not just the Chinese we're borrowing from. It's also sovereign wealth funds, which are created by a lot of Islamic republics. So we're on the hook. We've borrowed money from them. We've borrowed money from China. These are not our friends. Someday they are going to call our note. And when that happens, someday the Chinese are going to ask that their currency become the world's reserve currency. And when that happens, we won't even be able to print money to cover our butts. This is not a joke. And to sit there and think that you're going to keep getting a handout because of the color of your skin or your accent or where you came from or because you were born below the tracks, I'm sorry. God may help you if you pray. But unfortunately, putting your trust in princes, or government in this case, is simply not going to work. Government is a spent force. And right now, we're getting by on just an illusion that it's still there, powerful and strong. What part of that is so difficult to see for so many of you? God willing, if the creek don't rise, they'll allow me to come back and do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I borrowed that regular American from Archie Bunker. It's because I know it annoys some people.